So I got a few CDs in the mail from you this week, which I've been enjoying. We'll have to go through them one at a time, but this first one that I picked up was the Brahms three violin sonatas, um, which, like we were just talking about a minute ago, is a little bit ubiquitous in the classical music canon, some might say, but I think it is glaringly apparent as soon as you put it on why they're so timeless. There's just so much in them. I mean, for me, I'm not a classical music scholar by a long shot, but I just enjoy these pieces so much. The piano, first, one of the things that really strikes me is Brahms was definitely a composer who could get around the piano quite capably, because his pieces, even though these are violin sonatas, it's almost as much about the piano being an in front kind of, or playing along with and behind the violin as anything. There are other violin sonatas by other composers, I would say, where the piano is much more of like of a canvas and the violin is doing its thing. But these pieces are so kind of full of motion, and it's just, I personally love the Romantic era, and no one really represents that in a lot of ways better than Brahms. But you are much more well read and well versed in his music than I am, so I'm curious to teach me a little bit about kind of who he was. I'm always fascinated with classical music's composers' biographies, because I think the space of time kind of gives their biographies a different dimension to their music, to kind of know who they were a little bit.
Yeah, I love Brahms too. The one I've been listening to is this one. Let's see, there we go. Okay, Perlman and Ashkenazi, and it's hard to argue with those two guys playing. But to the point of the Brahms, I love his music. It is considered very mainstream, very, crowd pleaser, war horses. People would talk about that, about his symphonies, because every symphony in the entire nation will run Brahms symphonies through their programming every year. And some folks will complain like, we've heard that so many times. But his music is so well crafted and so beautiful and so powerful. I don't care, you know? And he was a real character. I mean, if you read about him, and this is a book that I fell into when I was trying to learn a little bit about Brahms, Jan Swafford's biography of Brahms, beautifully written, very, very scholarship driven, but very pleasant read for a deep biography. Yeah, Brahms came from Hamburg, very much a down, dirty working town in northern Germany. It was not the glitz of Vienna that the Mozart and all that, stuff we think of. And Brahms was a very good pianist. He went out and toured quite a bit, so he was a pianist by trade. And he was also quite of a craggy character by trade. He was very private. He tore up a lot of letters. He understood technology of his day, that if I leave letters and I leave unpublished pieces, they're going to come out when I have no control after I'm deceased. He tore up things they didn't want presented or preserved, including letters, including pieces of music, I think. And these three sonatas are beautiful. They're just beautiful. They have very powerful, active, romantic moments, and they have just heartbreaking reverie and melancholy in the slow movements and the slow sections. And Brahms lived in a difficult time musically. He came right behind. He was born not long after Franz Schubert and Beethoven died, like 6 and 7 years respectively after they died. He was born, and he has this famous quote that you run into if you read about him. And he grumbled. You can almost hear him, grousing. He feels he can hear the tramp of giants behind him, meaning, how can I write music knowing that I'm preceded by Schubert and Beethoven? I mean, who the hell can write something that will enter the pantheon or keep up with that? So he was kind of slow to hit symphonies, and he was very cautious about, I think, what he presented. course, he was wrong. His music was great and as good as those people. But I love that quote, "The tramp of giants behind me." That just says so much. Um, and also, another aspect of his time and times was the great controversy of Wagner. There was this whole thing. It was like red states, blue states, or electronic music versus rock and roll. It was this gigantic. People would almost get into fistfights at concerts, and the papers were filled with virulent, horrible critiques in both directions and slinging mud because you were either a Wagnerite or you were a Brahmsian. There were two theories in music at the time, and I think Wagner was considered to be the great future of modern music and full drama and pure music, and Brahms wrote music from another angle that I think holds up just as well. In fact, personally, I think Wagner was a dead end musically in the chain of things as they evolved, but I'm sure there are those who would argue vehemently with me about that. But anyway, it was a big deal in those days. Were you a Wagnerite or were you a Brahmsian? And these critics and people, now there's nothing in the newspapers that has this controversy about music at this level. I mean, we argue about immigrants and football and this kind of stuff, politics, masks, but it filled newspapers. People fought back and forth between papers, and letters were published back and forth about a given thing. Yeah. But the bottom line is these three violin sonatas are beautiful, and they're worthy of listening to right now in 2021 by anybody that wants to seek a new experience if they're not familiar with them. It's just extraordinary music.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Whether or not, whether or not you're well versed in classical music or more of kind of a occasional visitor like myself, they stand the test of time. They're beautiful for really any kind of listening. I definitely got to learn some more about Brahms. I always love hearing the backstory to these guys that are so far back in time. Really brings them to life.
Thanks for checking out our weekly web series, Deep Stacks, brought to you by Big X Music, a conversation each week with my dad, 40-plus year veteran of the music industry, founder of Horizon Records and concert promoter, where I sit down and we talk together about the music we're listening to. Please subscribe, leave us a comment down below, and join the conversation.